year. Last year we had a really good turnout, but as I was made aware of, there was a little controversy with the mental health facility coming into town, so that might have brought a few more people in. But it's good that we got a little turnout because obviously they really don't, there's no many issues that are affecting people here. But the main reason that we host this is we want to hear from you, what you see are potential issues or issues you see in your neighborhood. We're going to be talking for just a little bit. We each have some slides we're going to go over, talk about some stats, some of our concerns and stuff like that. Then we'll open up certainly for questions, and we want to have this as a two-way communication because again, the focus is this: is we want to hear from the community on your focus of what's wrong or what should be addressed within our community. We have three council members from West St. Paul here. Pat Arman. There you go. No. That's me. Lisa Angsarn. And where'd the other one go? Oh, there you are.
Sounds right here.
Okay. So thank you for coming. If you got any questions, just feel free to throw them out, and I'll get going. If you don't know how I usually present stuff, we kind of have a little fun. We have some trivia, and Julie Eastman, I think there's one question there that you know about, so you're not able to answer one of these questions. I hope you can read this, but if you can't, I got some graphs on here that are going to be a little bit hard to read. But just what we have here, we have Kathy Cannon from the Dakota County Attorney's Office. She's our county attorney. Sheriff Joe Legal and Chief Brian Lickey. The four of us work very closely together here in Northern Dakota County. When we're getting our butts handed to us on the street, call to call to call, if the Sheriff's Office has some available spots, they've been known to come up here once in a great while to help us out. We work very closely, all of us together, in criminal investigations and prosecutions. Major criminal investigations, shootings, stabbings, homicides, we all work together. Sheriff's Department comes up and processes crime scenes. If we have a shooting or a homicide in West St. Paul, South St. Paul comes to assist us. We do the same thing for South St. Paul. It's automatic. That's what we do. And of course, we work very closely with the prosecutor's office. We get them on board right away, and they help us in kind of directing the investigation if they see fit that it needs to go this way. Mental health initiatives, that's a big topic last few years in Dakota County and all across the country, actually. We're pretty much all on the same page on where we think we need to go and what we need to do. Calls for service, again, I touch base on that. When we are busy on patrol, we help each other out. South St. Paul's getting inundated with calls, and a high priority call comes up, we'll go take that. One good thing about us in Northern Dakota County is priority calls, they're not held. Unlike Minneapolis, St. Paul, where sometimes you got a burglary in progress, it might go 2 hours without a police response. No, up here we help each other out. You're going to get an immediate response. It might not be from the city that you live in, but it's going to be from a city next door, things of that nature. We're all part of Dakota County Drug Task Force. We're kind of refocusing on the Drug Task Force as of late. The Drug Task Force has always been really good at investigations. We're now focusing a little bit more on violent crimes, violent criminals. They still do investigate the narcotics. Fentanyl is a huge problem, and they are really good. They've seized tens of thousands of fentanyl pills just within the last year, and they're really good at that. But they also help us when we do have a violent criminal out there. They're really good at tracking them down, locating them, and taking them into custody for us. And South Metro SWAT, we have a collaborative effort between two counties, us and Rice County. We have a joint SWAT team. So all the equipment that you see at our outdoor events, that's not a West St. Paul piece of equipment. It's two counties that we share all this equipment with. I'm gonna go quick. I like talking a lot, so I'm gonna go quick. Real quick, West St. Paul. We are authorized for 40 officers. We currently have 37. One of our new officers starts next Tuesday. So we have a new officer starting next Tuesday. We currently have one in field training. We have 3 part-time, non-sworn community service officers. Those are individuals that are going to school for law enforcement. We have 4.75 full-time equivalent civilian employees. That's what we're authorized for. We are down 1.5 currently. So we are going through the hiring process for that. We have 1 social worker that's provided by Dakota County Social Services. That's part of our embedded social worker program. We have 1 officer dedicated to the mental health response, and we also have that embedded social worker. They work together as a team. So one thing we've been all trying to get more of is the crisis response social worker. We have 0.2 FTE dedicated out of our office, and that's certainly not enough. We do have 24-hour crisis response, and I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of times they don't have the manpower to respond to situations. They really don't. But when we have that person in our office, they respond with our officers through those crisis calls. We have 6 volunteer chaplains and about 15 police volunteer reserve officers. Some things we do, some of our community outreach. We do a lot of community outreach. Not only this, but our parks, our Cops in the Park event the other night, that was absolutely huge. We gave out over 600 backpacks. We had about 800 people attend. It was great. Some statistics. I'm not going to sugarcoat stuff, but I'm going to explain some of these look bad, but they're really not. I know this is really hard to see. 2021. Is that when NIBRS went into effect? Was in 2021, right? So FBI decided to get away from Part A, Part B crime reporting and went to NIBRS, National Incident Based Reporting System. So what we had to do is, prior to 2021, when we had say an armed robbery at Speedway, they run out the door, get in their car, take off, hit a car, get arrested, drunk driving. So there's like 4 or 5 different offenses that we charged this person with and arrested him for. We were only allowed to report the most serious offense. Now under NIBRS, we report everything. So that's like 5 offenses. So, but anyways, 2021, West St. Paul, this is metro agencies. 2021, we were number 2 in the metro area for offenses. A lot of that has to do, and I'm going to be honest, is petty type crimes that what we think about, stealing from cars. 95% of our theft from autos occur from cars that are left unlocked. Very seldom do we see somebody breaking a window to get in. They just open the car door and go in. Shoplifting was a big issue that we had a couple years ago. So just some of those petty offenses is what put us up to the top, because we all saw, if you're on social media, West St. Paul was the most violent city in the state of Minnesota. That's not true. It's because of those lower level offenses. But in 2022, we were able to get back down to number 5 in the metro area. So we're going down. We got a lot of retail in West St. Paul. 5 square miles, a lot of retail. And that contributes to that. These are a number of calls for service, or CAD calls, that we have over the past 5 years, I believe it is. 2016, we were at 24,000. 2022, we're now at pre-pandemic levels of 28,500 per year. These are the types of calls that we go on. Number 1 call that we actually get dispatched for, you probably can't read it, is those darn 911 hangups. 2022, we had 2,300 of those. So, 5 calls. But total of, like I said, just over 28,500 calls for service. Some of the major ones, and if you want any of this information, my card's on the back, shoot me an email, I'm more than happy to send it out to you via email too. I think the next one shows this. Yeah. So our homicides, we haven't had a homicide for 2 years, which is good. We usually average like one a year, but the past 2 years, we haven't had one. Last homicide we had was here in Thompson Park. I'm gonna say that we have charged people with, would we charge the mother with the fentanyl and the child manslaughter or something like that. We've had some accidental deaths that people needed to be held accountable for, and that has happened. But our last violent homicide was 2 years ago. And one thing I want to say too is, we knock on wood, but I've been saying this for the last 6-8 months, is starting in 2020, we had a lot of shootings in town. We had a lot of aggravated assaults. I don't think we've had a shooting in a year, I can remember. So our violent crime has definitely gone down dramatically. Our larceny and thefts, you can see in 2020, we topped out at 1361. We work with some of our big box retailers. Yes, Walmart, but we also work with Menards, Target, and some others to do more crime prevention activities. They need to take it, my view is they need to take it upon themselves to implement some crime prevention strategies in order to reduce theft from there. And it's worked. We're down to 678 last year. Auto thefts continue to be a problem. We were at 128 last year. We're on pace for that this year as well. Has anybody been a victim of auto theft here? Anybody had their car broken into here?
Thank you.
Aggravated assaults, 42 last year. That's been pretty steady, and as you can see, pretty much everything else has been kind of steady, except for our larceny. And then some other types of crimes, less the vandalism, for instance. 212. Everything, it fluctuates. Narcotics violations have certainly gone down. That's because we're not focusing on the petty stuff anymore. And we don't charge out the trace amounts anymore. So that has a lot to do with that as well. 2022, again, no homicides. 2023, no homicides. Sex offenses, we had 21 last year. We're at 13 this year. Aggravated assaults, 124 last year, and we're at 97 this year. I believe that's all assaults, not aggravated assaults, but all assaults. So, just some other numbers that you see here. Again, I can more than happy to send this out to you. Shoplifting, that was a big thing that we talked about last year, and some things that we've been working on. 2022, Target was #1 for shoplifting, followed by Walmart and Menards. This year, Walmart's leading with 81, and it looks like Target is at, I can't tell if that's a 57 or 67, but they're pretty close as well. So we're seeing a little bit more of the shoplifting. We're seeing a lot more transient people this year than we have in years past, and a lot of those transient people we're seeing and being suspects in these stores. My concerns, again, these are in no particular order. It's not ranked, and they change every frickin' day. But generally, recruitment is my #1 concern. When I started as a police officer in '91, I was one of just over 600 applicants for one open position. 2005, when I first started doing the recruitment and hiring for the department, we had about 250 applicants for an open position. Last time we had 3. It's tough. So we are now, what we're doing now is we're focusing on going out, meeting these individuals a lot more, going to schools, going to colleges, letting them get to know us, and when they're eligible to apply, when they're ready to apply after they graduate from school, they know us. Even if sometimes we go to career fairs that have nothing to do with law enforcement. Maybe they'll decide in the future that they want to do something else that they went to school with and they want to be a cop. Oh, South St. Paul's pretty cool because I met Officer McCarty and Williams, and they were pretty cool guys, and I'll apply for them. But it's also, we're not only recruiting for the police department, we're recruiting for West St. Paul. Every position in West St. Paul, whether it's engineering, accounting, something like that, we want to get our name out. So again, we are 2 or 3 short right now. We have 4 applicants in the last week, new applicants, believe it or not, which is weird, which is really good. Well, it stinks, but it's better than what we've been going. So we're going to be bringing those in next week for some interviews. Officer wellness, and that's also, we're talking about retention. We have to focus on our officers' wellness. When we talk about wellness, mental health, physical health, financial health, nutrition. We bring in seminars to talk about all of those. We have great relationships with a nutritionist that comes in, gives seminars, financial advisors, because if somebody's having money problems, they'll bring stuff to work. They won't be as productive. So we're looking at the holistic approach for officers' wellness. Violent crime, it's a really big concern of mine, even though it's very, very low here, because you go 2 blocks north of Annapolis and you can hear gunshots all the time. Homicide 8 blocks in St. Paul just a couple weeks ago. A lot of these offenders are West St. Paul residents, believe it or not. They're committing these crimes elsewhere. So it is a concern. Thankfully, it's not happening in West St. Paul currently. Mental health in the community, that's a huge concern as well. We have a lot of issues with mental health. We're trying to do a lot of things to address those issues with our community. Fentanyl and drug overdoses are huge in northern Dakota County. Me and Brian have been advocates for doing something unique. And the next slide kind of gets into this. Overdose calls, this was 2021 and 2022 rates. We're blowing everybody out of the water in South St. Paul and West St. Paul based on the population on overdoses. Burnsville and Hastings are close, but they're still considerably well behind us. So we've been advocating for some additional resources in the northern part of Dakota County. We have applied for a grant through the state of Minnesota. It's an ORCA grant, where we are going to be putting, if we get it, we're going to be partnering a full-time community EMT with a drug counselor and a peer support counselor, where they'll go out and meet with these individuals that either have overdosed, have the potential to overdose, or get referred to them by the community to go out there and get that working relationship with them in order to get them the help that they need. So it's a very unique program, something that as far as we know hasn't been tried in the state of Minnesota, but it's something that we learned at a conference last year or year before that was done out in the Boston area that was really unique, and we're going to try and bring it here. So hopefully we get that grant. If we don't get that grant, we do have legislative support at both the state and national level to potentially get us some funds in order to implement that. And that's all I have, but we got trivia. Who said this quote? And I'll give you a hint. It's a president, former president of the United States. This country will not be a permanently good place for any of us to live unless we make it a reasonably good place for all of us to live in. Anybody have any ideas? And it's not my favorite president, like I've had quotes before in my previous presentations. I did not agree with everything this president did, but some things I really liked about him.
Lyndon Johnson?
Nope.
Nixon.
Nope. All right, next hint.
Reagan.
Nope. There could be no greater issue than that of conservation in this country.
Teddy Roosevelt.
There you go. What I really liked about Teddy is he was a really good orator, especially when went to talk about conservation issues and women's rights issues. He was at the forefront of both of those back in the day. That's all I got.
Wow, you talk a lot.
I do talk a lot, sorry.
All right. So starting here, my name is Brian Wicke. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of South St. Paul, and I've been in my position for just over a year now, and I will say unequivocally it's been trial by fire. These last couple years in public safety, we've experienced challenges like we've never experienced, and South St. Paul's not unique to that. Over the next couple minutes, I'm going to talk quick, and not as much as Brian, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to see a lot of similarities in our two departments. We have different community challenges. We are structured the same. We operate the same. We have the same philosophies on hiring for character, hiring for ethics, and providing service to our communities. That rolls out across the board. Structure-wise, our department, we are supposed to have 35 officers. Like Brian said, we don't have 35. I'm at 31 right now. Every time I get one, I lose one. I get one and I lose one. Interestingly, we're both sharing the same problem. Our officers that are leaving, they're not leaving to go to other law enforcement agencies. We are now hiring a generation, or 10 years ago actually, we started hiring a generation of employees that entered this career, have done it, they checked it off their list, and they're out. The economy is providing them jobs that make more than our police officers and our firefighters are paid. They've done this job and they're getting out. So that's some of the challenges that I'm seeing in my department. I think I've lost one to a marriage out of state, and I've lost two already this year. 10-year veterans, outstanding cops that are just, they've had enough. They're gonna move on. They're gonna get a job in the private sector, work 8 to 4, not get called in, not have to deal with some of the stressors that we'll talk about in a little bit here. We are a little bit different in the staffing when it comes to our part-time community service officers, and I'll get to that a little bit later on, what we do with them and what our goal is by having 8 community service officers in our community. They focus on our parking complaints. We have a lot of on-street parking in South St. Paul. They focus on our ordinance violations, and they focus on our animal control, and they provide the support that makes our department move forward each and every day. We have 4 full-time support staff workers. I'll call those your traditional face of the police department if you come into our lobby. They provide that level of support. Like West St. Paul, we have an embedded social worker who does amazing work, and we pair them with 1 officer in our department. The work those 2 do cannot be replicated and are worth their weight in gold. We also have a crisis response worker. That's a different role, understand. Our embedded social worker are structured that after this uniform, our 911 streetcars have an interaction with someone experiencing a mental health crisis. Our embedded worker and our officer that next day, as soon as possible, try to get out, try to figure out what broke to lead them to have a law enforcement contact and see, do we have the systems in place that we can connect them with the resources to divert them, re-get them on the right path, and divert them away from a future law enforcement contact, which is all of our goal. In contrast to that is our crisis response worker. That is the one when people call into us and they say, hey, I see a guy running down the street naked. Okay, kind of a cop problem, but kind of not. There's obviously something going on in that young man or that young woman's life that really isn't sitting right with them. Are we the appropriate resource to deal with them? Maybe. Are we better off dealing with the traffic control side of it and let a professional who's had this conversation before come up and interact with them, get a blanket around them and get them off the side of that road? That's where our goal is with that crisis response worker. We have 1 community advocate, that's an intimate partner and sexual violence advocate that works out of our office. That's provided by a nonprofit called 360s Community, who does wonderful work throughout our entire county. This young lady in our office does outstanding work following up with our victims of domestic violence, a significant problem in the city of South St. Paul. and intimate partner violence, and finding a route out of that for them. If we can't get them out of it, we're gonna help them navigate what they're going through.
We also have one of those, we just got ours back, so I forgot to put that in my list.
Like the West St. Paul Police Department, we got anywhere from 12 to 15 reserve officers. Those are young men and women, old young men and women in our communities that volunteer. They wear a uniform slightly different than ours. They support our staff in community events. They support our staff in our day-to-day operations. And quite frankly, at 2 in the morning when bad things happen, and I don't have enough officers and Brian doesn't have enough officers to really resolve this incident, we call these men and women in, and they are on the outside fringes, keeping people away and allowing us to safely operate in that hot zone in the middle. Following that up, we have a Police Explorer program in South St. Paul. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. We've had that program for about 8-9 years right now. That has proved one of our most valuable feeder programs into our hiring in our department. Some more community engagement pictures. As you see, some of the events are the same, some are different. Much like the West St. Paul Police Department, a focus in our community is engagement with our residents, engagement with our business owners, engagement with every stakeholder in our community. And I think you see that through our hiring standards, and you see that through our day-to-day operations. Now, Brian had a lot of stats, and I'm gonna make fun of him for this. I don't have the luxury of having an analyst. I saw what he presented, and I'm like, I spent like 4 hours on it, and I gave him. So, this is what you're getting, I apologize. So this is the data we talked about, our NIBR statistics. Comparison, side by side, West St. Paul and South St. Paul are remarkably similar communities. The challenges we face are remarkably different though. And where I start with is shoplifting. It's gonna come as no surprise to you. In the city of South St. Paul, I think we're in 22, we had 2 shoplifting in South St. Paul. Not a whole lot of retail to steal from. Quite a contrast to what West St. Paul experiences. The difference what we face in South St. Paul, and it's a really hard problem to get our feet on, or to get underneath, is our assault. Our assaults in the city of South St. Paul, the violence that takes place embedded in our community through intimate partner violence and straight out weapon related or hands and fist violence in our community is significantly higher. It's been that way for years. It's not trending up, it's not trending down, it's there. The change that we've seen over the last couple of years, and especially since 2020, is the introduction of weapons, specifically handguns, into these confrontations. Our weapon-related offenses, as you move down into our crimes against society, are fairly high for a community of our size. As you look at some of our other stats, we did have 1 homicide last year, and that's a side conversation that involved a marijuana transaction. Marijuana is not a victimless crime like they will, some will have you believe. And then as we move into 23, we are trending in about the same direction. An interesting side note to this, Brian talked about the numbers, and these are buckets that things fall into. We're listed as having 2 homicides already this year. Both of those are stemming from traffic fatalities. One involved an impaired driver, one involved a motorist who ran over a pedestrian. Don't know really on the attempt. Because of the nature of the classification of where those dumped into, they are classified as homicides, but they're not homicides in the traditional sense that we interact with. Another change with us is staffing. The city of West St. Paul, and I won't speak for Brian, staffs heavily during the day. They have a high call load during the day. In the city of South St. Paul, our call load's just a tad bit less during the day. At nights, we flip. We go through the roof with calls for service. Everyone's home from work. South St. Paul, by far and large, unless you're in our business park, is a bedroom community. People leave and go to work, then they come home, and then they
We
start.
got like 3 times as many bars in South St. Paul.
Yeah. So, and with that, interestingly, what you're gonna see is where we place our priorities. Again, no shock, we don't have to invest a whole lot of time in retail theft prevention in South St. Paul. So where do we invest our time? To some of our alcohol service establishments, and you'll see our DWIs are about 3 times they are in West St. Paul. Because of the problems we have with alcohol-related crashes and fatalities, we have to invest these resources to attempt to solve this problem in our community. So that's some of the side-by-side stats. If you looked at them, generally speaking, they are in alignment with West St. Paul. My contact information is up here if anyone wants to snap a picture, and I can be reached at any time.
Trivia time. What year did the Stockyard Exchange Building open?
1887.
Oh,
It's cheating.
History teacher, I better know that.
Yeah, I know.
That was too easy. All right, Joe, you are up.
All right, thanks everybody, and thank you to the chief for allowing me this opportunity. I'm your sheriff, Joe Lico, and we work very closely with the cities. I can't say that's the same case everywhere across the state. Take it from me as a sheriff, I work with other sheriffs, there's 86 others of us throughout the state, and it's very important to have collaboration, work well. I go back a long ways with both Brians. I worked at the drug task force with Brian when jean shorts were a thing. We used to wear jean shorts back in 2000.
We got photos.
Yeah. Also, you know, as a sidebar, this is my home here in West St. Paul. I grew up on Oakdale and Stanley, so it's a special place in my heart here. I went to Brady, right through the windows here. Both my kids graduated from St. Croix Lutheran, so I have a very special place in my heart for West St. Paul. Sergeant Wanderer was my first contact with law enforcement. I won't get into that as a juvenile, but with West St. Paul, it was a good encounter. I learned a lot from him, and I'm just going to briefly touch on a little bit what the sheriff's office provides. And I know it was already touched on a little bit about our collaboration. We talked about South Metro SWAT, which we work together on, and we don't get called out that much, but it's great to have that resource. There are two, Burnsville and Eagan are the only two cities in Dakota County that have their own SWAT teams. Otherwise, every other city, municipality, city police department, and the sheriff's office are all part of one, along with Rice County as well. We talked about the drug task force briefly. That has advanced so much, going back to even when Brian and I were out there doing buys for small amounts of methamphetamine sitting at the Kmart lot. Now, that was a thing. Now they're buying pounds. I wish I could say that it's getting better out there with the drugs, but the weight is tenfold than it was even 10 years ago when I ran the drug task force in 2010. Unfortunately, there are cartels here. I don't know if it's a shock, but there's cartels and they have runners, and we focus on the larger seizures, right? Because we believe if we can get the larger seizures rather than, not that we were chasing smaller amounts back then, but there was not that much weight out there. There were bigger dealers, but we weren't seeing it as much as we are now. But if you get the larger amounts, that helps contain it, hopefully, where it doesn't spill out. That goes for the thousands, tens of thousands of pills of fentanyl that we're seizing as well. We know that if we get up the food chain and arrest those and seize that, it'll stop from dispersing amongst our streets. And as you know, there's no gates or bridges or any lift bridges or anything like that. They can go right across into any county. They don't care. They don't come into West St. Paul. Well, boy, we better stop here because they're going to prosecute here versus wherever. So it's all over the metro, and sometimes we have to go up into St. Paul to get it, and we'll do that. But like Chief Sturgis said, we are concentrating as well with the drug task force on that violent crime aspect because we're seeing more of it. And when you have 15 officers that are dedicated, the city police departments that are dedicated to that, all but one right now has a body up there that's in Monroe Heights. We're trying to get them back on board. But when you have that many investigators that work together in undercover, plain clothes, very highly skilled, connected. They don't just work with each other through the cities, they work with other counties as well through the drug task force, and they get to know who's who. And you can get on people pretty quick and run down investigations and get to the source. So they've been recognized nationally for their work. It's been really great. So we want to just promote that a little bit. The Electronic Crimes Unit, that's also a collaboration that we have with our cities and the sheriff's office. And I think Eagan is the only agency that's not part of that. They kind of do their own thing there as well. But it's basically bringing investigators together to investigate the electronics, right? Everything's on a cell phone now. It used to be the hard drives. It started when we bring in the hard drives in and going through those things. But there's always evidence that helps county attorney's office in their charging. I'd like to think it really increases the prosecution rates as far as conviction rates go because you have that hard evidence. Chief Wiki brought up the fact of that homicide that happened with the marijuana deal, and I think there was some, evidence on that, wasn't there, Brian, as far as a cell phone or something like that helped us get on who that person was communicating with before that drug deal?
Yeah, do you mind if I step in
Yeah,
on
go
there?
ahead.
So I want to speak to the value of these partnerships. It makes perfect sense that we work together in this. We had a homicide, I'm not trying to share any intimate details here, about a year ago here today. And within hours of the event taking place, we had contacted the sheriff's office, our partners with the electronics crime unit, secured a warrant, and it got the victim's cell phone. That led us to an individual, and I'm gonna speak very generally. With that individual's name, we were then able to call our partners with the Dakota County Drug Task Force. They were able to mobilize. Within 24 hours, we received a phone call. We had located our suspect. We had located a firearm. Don't know if it's a firearm that was used in the offense, and they had that individual in custody. I will be completely honest, that would have taken my investigators, my staff, a number of days to get to the point to do all this on our own. We simply could not provide this level of public safety without these partnerships that Sheriff Lego's talking about.
Prior to the electronics crime unit, we'd have to send our equipment to be analyzed to the BCA, because we don't have the funds or the personnel able to download and dig the stuff out of these electronics. So it would take months, literally months, if we sent this up to the BCA in order to get this stuff extracted from these files. Homicide, we can get the stuff extracted in sometimes a matter of hours.
And even it's as simple as getting surveillance video from a business and cleaning it up with a license plate. I have so much confidence in that group, along with the drug task force, to work together. They do work together, they work out of the same building together, so if they get on something, there's a violent offender. There was one incident here last year, it was a bank robbery, and once they determined a plate, I said, they're gonna get on, I'm gonna get them arrested within 24 hours. Sure enough, they did. I have that much confidence in them, they're just that good. So this collaboration works. You share information, you share skill sets, you learn, you move on, and it continues to build, and it's highly beneficial. Because we alone, as each individual agency, can't do this on our own. We can't. We're not St. Paul. We're not Hennepin. We're not Minneapolis. We need to pool together our resources because that costs money. That saves all taxpayers' money as well when you collaborate like that. But the information sharing is invaluable. Mobile field force. I mean, we had the riots, that spilled into our county, obviously, and Chief Sturgeon was up there and said over the radio, "I need help. I'm surrounded," and we all just came. And that's the model for the sheriff's office and every police agency for that matter in Dakota County. And I instruct our people, even though we're miles away, if you hear that, if you even think they need help, just go. And don't call, ask if you should go, just go. And then, because they're busy, we'll figure it out later. You can always come back. So we are always responding, floating that way or going that way to assist because we know that our resources are limited. Dakota 911 dispatch, mobile field force, that is something that formed around that time, with the turtle suits we call them, basically the soft suits, the shields and all that stuff, and we wanted to make sure we were protecting lives and property. We had to form that as a contingency here for Dakota County, and they train, and the officers, the deputies at our office are all trained in that as well, and same with the cities. So they come together so they have numbers. You can't just have a mobile field force of 8 people. That's not gonna save this building, right? You need numbers. So fortunately, I haven't been able to use that, haven't had to use that recently. 911 dispatch, as you probably know, that's also, we used to have, how many, 5 PSAPs before this? Before we came together, like in 2004-ish? But it's located in Rosemount, and they dispatch for the entire county now, and we all work together on that. So that's where all those statistics and stuff come from as well. Anybody know, I don't have trivia, classes or things like that I apologize, but I do have a question for you to see. I'm not trying to stump you, but do you know what the difference is between a sheriff's office and a police agency? As far as mandates go, what is the sheriff responsible for that differs from police departments? Yes, sir?
Jail.
The jail, yes. That's one.
Highway.
I'm sorry?
Highway.
Highways, well, we're all responsible for that. Typically, State Patrol, if there's crashes, they'll come out on those if it looks like it's a potential fatal, but we cover highways altogether. That's
The
not a distinct, I'm sorry?
The cities, the outskirts?
The outskirts, yeah, our patrol area, that's not mandated, but yes, we cover 355 square miles of patrol area. South of, Rosemount, south of Hastings, south of Farmington, Lakeville, down to Cannon Falls, Northfield, almost to Red Wing there. So we have 27 deputies assigned to patrol. Overall at the sheriff's office, we have about 200 employees. Half of those are in the jail, roughly. So jail is one mandate. Any others?
Courthouse security?
Courthouse security. We have courthouse here in Northern Service Center. You'll see our deputies inside there. We are responsible by statute for courthouse security. So with the jail, what comes with the jail? How do you get those prisoners or inmates or arrestees back and forth? Transport. So we have to go, if somebody arrests a warrant up in Cass County and they're held on, body only, or they got a bail they can't make, we go up and get them, and vice versa. Other counties come to our office or to our jail to get their people they might have on holds. So transport, we have court security, we have the jail. Anything else?
Training.
I'm sorry?
Training
Training?
of officers.
Yeah, I mean, we all share that. We all do that too. State mandates. So we also have civil service. If you have an order for protection that's issued against you, our deputies go out and serve that. Now, sometimes we rely on the cities if they happen to know where that person is, and we can share that information, or we do share that information. But for the most part, we are responsible by a mandate to serve court orders and writs and foreclosures and all that stuff. That's a totally different world I'm not even familiar with. I never worked in that environment. I have people in there that know it at the back of their hand, and I trust them. So that's a big part of our agency as well. About waterways, if we find a body, knock on wood, in Thompson Lake, Lily Lake, the sheriff's office comes and has to investigate all water-related accidents and deaths, as well as recreational safety. So that includes on a lot of our trails, with ATVs and things like that, we'll come out and do that. But every waterway in Dakota County, we go out and investigate any water-related deaths. Egan just had one yesterday. So, anything else? I think that's all we have. So I gave you a little bit of the composition as far as the jail goes. We have a 264-bed jail. Any idea of how many of the inmates that are in our jail on every given day have been there before? 264 bed, we're at about 200 right now. It went down quite a bit during COVID because we let the lower offenses go out, but it's starting to build back up.
75%?
Yeah, very good. 73% have been in our jail before. So it's a revolving door. We have really good programs in our jail, and we're doing things on the outside as far as embedded social workers to try to get them connected to resources so they're not coming back through that revolving door. But 73%, over half of our arrestees and our inmates do not even live in Dakota County, but they're committing crimes in our county. So those are interesting statistics. The sheriff's office, we also do, these aren't mandated things, we have a commercial vehicle enforcement. That we have one deputy that goes out and does all the heavy trucks and things like that. Construction season, we don't have construction going on at all, do we? Or heavy trucks or gravel and everything all over the place, falling all over our roadways during the summer. But he goes out and enforces. He goes in the cities and assists with the police departments. We also have someone assigned to the Department of Drug Enforcement, the DEA, as well as the U.S. Marshal's Office, Fugitive Task Force. They also go after the bad people that are wanted federally, most likely. I think that's about it. One of the things, we're facing the same challenges, recruitment, retention. And it's hard to recruit when the pools and the enrollment in the schools are so low. So our best recruitment tool is our retention right now. You have to plug the holes in the leaky pool before you fill it. Like Brian said, hire one, lose one. Hire one, lose two. That's what we're doing. We're treading water right now, and it's kind of scary. It is scary because we're having people leave earlier. Sheriff Leslie just retired. I just got elected, by the way, this last year. I've been with the sheriff's office for 26 years. So I worked my way through different aspects of the office and served as the chief deputy for 8 years under Sheriff Leslie, operating the business side of it. And just I can share the same stories as Brian. When I got hired, there were over 200 applicants for one job. We had 14 last time when we closed our applicant pool a couple weeks ago. So we got to figure it out, but we have to retain our people, and that means taking care of them. We hold them accountable. They have a very difficult job, as you understand and probably know, but they get burned out quick. And with the outside pressure, even though I know that's the loud minority that's coming out, we have a lot of support in our profession, I believe, but they hear that, they see that, and the stressors that come with that, the dangers of getting killed, getting sued, going to jail, it's not worth it for a lot of people. Tim Leslie worked for 42 years, you're not gonna see that again. He might make it.
No.
But,
No.
but you're not gonna see those long careers anymore. They're 10 and out, they're 15 and out. So, we gotta stabilize our profession somehow in that workforce, because this is the bedrock, the foundation is public safety. If you don't feel safe in your communities, then everything else breaks loose, right? So we're trying to piece everything together. You have great leadership here up in the northern side of the county, and I'm honored to be your sheriff and to work with these fine gentlemen. So, I'll make any questions, or we'll just hand it off to Kathy. I have my contact information here as well, and I can answer questions now or later as well. So.
All right, Joe, you can't answer this question. How many sheriffs has there been in Dakota County? Joe Palazzo, no.
I know.
32.
Oh,
Higher or lower?
lower,
Out.
13.
higher,
25,
lower,
20,
higher.
22.
21.
How impressive is that?
I looked it up to make some research. 21. Real quick, there's a lot of collaborative efforts. We got so many going on. I could not put them all on a slide. Brian couldn't put them all on a slide. Joe couldn't put them all on a slide. But there is so many collaborative efforts that all 4 of our agencies are part of that literally it would take 3 pages typewritten in single space. There's a lot of stuff that we do together in order to make this work for all of us.
And that is what makes Dakota County a great place to work if you're being the county attorney. I've been in the county attorney's office for 23 years, and if you saw the badges up there, I work directly with 12 different law enforcement agencies, and every one of them is outstanding, and they're made even more outstanding because of all the collaboration that they do, and they make my job a lot easier. So I'm Kathy Keena. I am your county attorney. I'm happily serving as your county attorney. Like I said, I've been with the office for 23 years. My office has a lot of different statutory duties. I'm not going to quiz you like Sheriff Lico did. We have 96 employees in the office. Of those, 46, including me, are attorneys. So I'm going to focus on the public safety things that we do and give you some highlights of the 2022 crime statistics. So we're first one of the things that my office is required to do is that we prosecute all offenses committed by juveniles in Dakota County at any level, whether it's a petty misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, or felony level offense, they come to my office. We are also responsible for prosecuting all felony level offenses committed by adults that occur in the county. So when you hear about shoplifting and DWIs, unless that shoplifting or theft reaches a threshold of over $1,000, those go to the city attorneys. DWIs, the only DWIs that we prosecute are felony level DWIs or any DWIs that occur in the unincorporated parts of the county. So, what I've got up on this slide is the number of juvenile cases that we have charged over the past 10 years. And in 2022, we charged 725 juvenile delinquency cases. That was an increase of 235 over 2021 and was also an increase in 2020. I am not alarmed by that number. I expected that because of COVID and kids being locked down at home. A lot of the juvenile offenses that we see come out of our schools, misdemeanors, assaults, disorderly conducts. And so out of that 725, that blue line represents the felony level offenses. So last year we had so out of the 725, 184 of those were for felony level offenses. But the majority of cases, 416, were misdemeanors and petty misdemeanors. Of interest to me was that out of all the cases that we charged, we were able to determine that 20% of those were committed by non-county juveniles. So juveniles that came into the county, and I'm not saying our Dakota County juveniles are angels and they're not going into other counties and committing crimes, but I found that interesting. So this just shows you the, by police agency, the cases that they referred in and that we charged. So Burnsville in 2022 was the big winner, and they had quite an increase over 2021. So there was 136 cases that they referred in that we charged. Number 2 was Lakeville. Number 3, South St. Paul. Number 4 was Egan, and number 5 was Apple Valley. West St. Paul came in at number 7. For our juvenile violent crime, we're fortunate in Dakota County. We don't have the same experiences that Hennepin County has had, or Ramsey County for that matter, especially with carjackings. At the height of the carjackings in Hennepin County, they determined that over half of them were being committed by juveniles. We have not had any carjackings. The first carjacking that we've had in the last 5 years that I can remember occurred in January of this year and was committed by a juvenile from Hennepin County. We had a second one that occurred in Hastings, probably 2 months ago. He was from Hennepin County and he had just been released from jail and needed a way to get home.
Went to the Cub Foods lot and jumped in a car.
So the assaults that are represented here, these are felony level assaults. So we had, meaning that there had to be some substantial bodily harm or great bodily harm. So we charged 22 of those last year. Dangerous weapons, so these kids can't have pistols. So we saw a significant increase in that. Sex-related remained even. Threats of violence went up slightly. Robbery went up slightly. And then we did have 2 murders that juveniles committed that we charged. So the first one is Parker Benson. So he was, I think, 3 months shy of his 18th birthday, but this occurred in April of 2022 in West St. Paul. Not a traditional type homicide. He's actually charged with murder in the 3rd degree for selling a pill that contained fentanyl, and a young 15-year-old girl took the pill and ended up dying from an overdose. I petitioned to have him certified for adult prosecution. That certification was granted, but he is now appealing that determination. So we've got, the appeal is to the Minnesota Court of Appeals, and there's an oral argument being held on that in November of this year. The second one is the one that Chief Wicki was talking about in South St. Paul. This was a marijuana deal. It's alleged that Mr. Semlock showed up at the victim's house, Anthony Scully, who was also age 17 at the time, and shot the victim. He too was 3 or 6 months shy of his 18th birthday, so my office filed a motion to have him certified as an adult for prosecution, and that motion was granted, and he has his next court appearance in October. So we also, my office, we try to get kids on the right track if they're kind of new to the system, and so we have a number of juvenile accountability programs that we run, and these are for first-time low-level offenders, and those to you. We specifically started a disorderly conduct diversion program because of all the disorderly conduct cases that we were getting out of the schools. And that's been successful. So, in addition to the cases that we charge, these are the cases that we have referred to our juvenile accountability programs. And so last year, we referred 304 juveniles to one of our accountability programs. All right, turning to the adult side, I'm going to show you the same type of graph I had up there for the juveniles. Last year, we charged 2,183 felony level cases. That was an increase of 315 cases from 2021. That blue line represents the number of drug cases that we charged. So out of the 2,183 cases we charged, 612 of those were felony drug cases. Generally speaking, about 25 to 30% of our felony cases that we charge are drug cases. Again, this shows referrals by agency, the cases that we charged. Number 1 was Burnsville, number 2 was Eagan, number 3 was Apple Valley, 4 was West St. Paul, 5 Inver Grove Heights, and South St. Paul came in at number 6.
Can I just touch on something real quick? Kind of a soapbox for me. The drug offenses, I have a really, drug enforcement is close to my heart. We have worked with the Dakota County Attorney's Office and the courts very closely over a number of years. We were one of the first counties to start a drug court where individuals, these individuals that have possession of narcotics for personal use, or maybe they're selling a little bit just to support their habit. One of the first counties in the state to implement that program in order to get individuals the help that they need in order to get off drugs. And then we saw some things that were, I mean, it was a great program, but then we also implemented with the county attorney's office. It was, 4 years ago we brought forth the diversion program that the county attorney's office has implemented and started. Worked with the Dakota County chiefs. Hey, we want to do this. We thought it was a great idea. It just gives them another chance to eventually keep it off the record and get the treatment that they need. So there's a lot of diversion programs that really help out individuals. I worked narcotics for almost 10 years. I can't count. I don't have enough fingers, toes to count the number of thank you letters I received from individuals that I arrested and got into one of these programs to get off of narcotics and drugs. It's the only way a lot of these people can get off of narcotics is just they're forced to. And I'm a little upset that this last legislative session basically legalizing paraphernalia and trace amounts of narcotics. Because a lot of times we see these individuals that are homeless, that are smoking crack, methamphetamine out there, and they have the pipes with residue, and there's absolutely nothing we can do anymore. We used to be able to get them referred into some of these programs, forced basically, to get the help that they need, because that's the only way that they're doing it. It really is.
So just to add that, we do run a number of different treatment courts in Dakota County, and so we have the adult drug treatment court. We also have a juvenile drug court. It's the only one in the state of Minnesota. We have a veterans treatment court, which we're typically there. We're seeing substance use disorders and or mental health disorders. And the diversion programs, we actually give drug offenders, low-level drug offenders, a couple bites at the apple. I started a pretrial drug diversion program when I was first appointed to fill out Jim Backstrom's term back in 2021. And prior to that, we We also have a drug diversion program after they've been charged, and then we give them another shot at a diversion program. So it's really hard, you know, dealing with addiction, and our goal is to get them rehabilitated so they stop committing crimes, because a lot of times the drug abuse leads to other crimes, theft, assaults, driving under the influence.
And the stress it puts, I don't know if anybody has had a relative that's been addicted to methamphetamine or fentanyl. It affects the whole family.
And methamphetamine, with the drug cases that we're prosecuting, methamphetamine is by far the number one drug that we're prosecuting. What we saw this in 2022 was an increase in opioid prosecutions, and specifically about half of those were for fentanyl. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but fentanyl right now is the number one cause of death of adults between ages 18 and 45. It's a huge problem. In Dakota County in 2022, there were 52 overdose deaths, and 39 of those were due to fentanyl. In 2021, there were 56 deaths, and 42 of those were attributable to fentanyl. And so that, this is just showing again kind of the more serious crimes and how many cases we charged compared to 2021. Felony assaults by far were number one. Everything else was, you know, pretty stable. Nothing of real concern. So I'm going to focus on, we had 5 cases that we charged, murder cases that we charged in 2022. Not all of them occurred in 2022, so I'm just going to touch on those briefly. This one, I think you mentioned, Quinita McDaniel. This actually occurred on December 7th, 2020 in West St. Paul. Ms. McDaniel was staying at an apartment, a friend's apartment in West St. Paul with her 3-year-old child. Ms. McDaniel has a substance use disorder. She was known to use fentanyl. The person that she was staying with was known to sell drugs, including fentanyl. She was sleeping on the couch, woke up the next morning, her 3-year-old was beside her and wasn't breathing. Autopsy was conducted and was determined that the child died from fentanyl toxicity, meaning we got a hold of that fentanyl while in the apartment. We charged her with second-degree manslaughter, which means she caused the death of her child while committing the crime of neglect or endangerment. She did enter a guilty plea. She's awaiting sentencing, and right now she is undergoing treatment at Teen Challenge. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but trying her best. Another case that was fentanyl related. This occurred on January 27th in 2021. It occurred in Egan. Mr. Isaac is accused of, he and another adult sold some pills to a juvenile. That juvenile then sold it to Hunter Carlson, age 16, who then died of a fentanyl overdose. So he's charged with third-degree murder, and that case is still pending. The next one we're going to just touch on is Brendan Reynolds. This is the one that occurred in this beautiful park back in June of 2021. Victim was Javon Malone, age 20. Not going to go into all the details, but they were known to each other previously, and Mr. Reynolds blamed Mr. Malone for the death of his brother and showed up at an event that the victim was attending in the park and shot him. So that, we're still waiting. That's going to be going to a jury trial here, and we're waiting for the date to be set. The next one actually did occur in 2022, and this occurred in Maple Grove Heights. These two, clearly, they look like they might be drug users. Michael Lee, while his wife was out of town, decided to hire someone to come in and give him an erotic massage in his home. I'm not sure what happened inside the home, but Ms. West showed up, went into the house, and then later came out and told her boyfriend, who was waiting in the vehicle, Mr. Slack, that she didn't get paid. So they decided to break back into the house to try to get the victim's phone because they figured they could somehow pay themselves with his phone. They started busting out the back door. Mr. Lee locked himself into a bathroom. These two pounded or got a hole in the door, and Mr. Slack had a gun and shot Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee was on the phone with 911 as they were breaking in, and so police responded. By then, these two had left, and the one thing I didn't highlight in the complaint or talk about much is that at the time this happened, Mr. Lee's 2-year-old son was in the home. And so when police arrived, they were trying to get this 2-year-old to open the front door, not realizing that the back door had been broken into. So they both accepted responsibility for what they did and pled guilty, and both were sentenced to 30 years in prison. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Some of you know I like to travel a little bit. So, this is Where Am I? I need more specific than what state I'm in. The city. Think about it. Congratulations. Yes. My dream trip went up there this last spring. I want to retire there I want to live up there when I retire. But yeah. What
You know why I think I know that? It's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Bars.
Okay.